Hello, esteemed audience, distinguished guests, and healthcare enthusiasts. Welcome to episode 15 of our Decoding AI in Healthcare series. I'm Dr. Harshita Gupta, your host, and to kick off our discussion, let me introduce our first guest, Benny Esparra. With 25 years in healthcare, his global expertise blends clinical, business, and technological antecedents. His rich career trajectory spans from decorated service in the United States Air Force to leading roles at prestigious institutions such as the Mayo Clinic and in Fortune 500 MedTech companies. Currently, he is the Vice President of Global Health Networks and Digital Health Integration, leading AI strategy, the President of Healthcare Innovation and Consulting Firm, and a co-founder of two startups building health AI solutions. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Gupta. What a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Patel.
Hi, how are you, Benny?
Terrific.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, and we have Dr. Dipu Patel, a digital health consultant. Dr. Dipu's expertise lies in her unique blend of clinical insights and a profound understanding of technology's role in enhancing patient education and advocacy. With such esteemed guests on board, I'm confident that today's webinar will be both enlightening and inspiring. So without any further ado, let's dive into our discussion on MedTech and AI in healthcare. Over to you, Dipu.
Thank you so much, Harshita. Thank you, Benny, for being here and taking time out of your busy schedule. I'm really excited to have this conversation because I think this brings a different angle to a lot of the conversations we've had in the past in this podcast. But we'll start with kind of setting the stage for our audience in terms of what is MedTech, and I guess laying out the differences or the commonalities between MedTech and digital health and AI, I guess. We'll start there and then kind of continue from there.
Yeah, what is AI? I mean, everybody has their own interpretations.
That's the most philosophical question we can ever have right now, right? What is AI?
Yeah, I think if I could be a bit philosophical here, we see a transition from the Industrial Revolution into the 21st century, now into technology age. And so MedTech, I think quite generally, is from the 1900s and focused on anything from medical devices and surgical instruments to therapies, both across the care continuum and vertically, different types of disease states and specialties. Digital health, some people consider it to be a subset of MedTech or medical devices. Some people view it as its own realm. And I think it's reflective of the technology age, information age, and how do we leverage those advancements for enhancement of MedTech and medical innovation.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think one of the things that our audience has probably used and grappled with MedTech most of their careers, I would say. You know, things like the robotic arm, all of these things that we use, the actual physical tools that we use in practice, whether it be surgery, anesthesia, wherever, orthopedics, wherever we may be. And, you know, it's funny because I have the reverse understanding. I see digital health as the umbrella under which MedTech is one kind of subset of it. So it's interesting to see your viewpoint where it's a little bit reversed and or to the side. But that kind of goes to show you how different these spaces are and how they actually are connected in many, many ways. And we all kind of bring our different lens to it, depending on where we're practicing and how we're practicing.
Yeah, I think certainly the younger generations like yourself tend to lead digital health as the prevalent category.
You're not that much older than I am, though, I will have to say. But you're right. I think it's the evolution of this, right? And I think to kind of dive into what we talk about here a lot is about how AI is going to impact the particular space that you're in. So what do you foresee as the impact of AI in the current landscape of healthcare? Have you seen a significant change in MedTech because of AI?
Yeah, so my experience is relegated to the United States, and I know that in Asia, AI is a very exciting field that seems to be getting a lot of attention and movement and advancement. So I think that we're dipping our toes in the water in the medical device side. The newer innovations automatically incorporate some type of digital health component or an AI, even if it's a simple machine learning model. It's those companies that have mechanical medical devices that need to adjust and change. And it's difficult for those, especially publicly traded companies, to try to make that change without kind of understanding the full risks of adopting an AI data strategy. But we're getting there, and there's some really amazing companies that are integrated in AI, even from a multimodal standpoint, into their medical devices and MedTech.
Yeah, yeah. Are there examples that come to mind as you've been kind of navigating this space?
Yeah, certainly. So there are, from the larger companies, you're seeing a lot of back office automations to try to improve efficiencies and cost savings as the way they're dipping the toes. For the newer companies, what you're seeing is an advancement in the imaging space. I think you remember you mentioned to me one time there was about 70% of FDA approvals were in the radiology space.
Yeah.
And so that's right. That ship sailed. It's amazing. So there are companies that integrate different radiology modalities to create new predictive analytics in patient treatment and diagnosis. So I would say that that's the area we're seeing the most movement. And then obviously there's a lot of buzz around generative AI and what it can mean for patient engagement and personalized medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to kind of clump them into a couple of different buckets, the back end and front end of office practice or clinical practice are going to be really impacted across the board when it comes to engaging patients using specifically generative AI, but also, the more deep learning and machine learning algorithms that maybe the patient doesn't see, but the clinicians will also be impacted in terms of learning the value of these models because they will continue to inform our practice. One of the things that I always think about, and I think I'm not alone, obviously, in this, but like, as this technology evolves and at the pace at which it's evolving, what we're grappling with very actively, at least in this community that you and I are part of, and as well as a number of other people, are the ethical considerations that we have to have as we are building these models. And what do we do as an industry, as a profession, to make sure that we're, really putting the do no harm principle at the forefront of everything that we're doing? Because considering sometimes we don't know how these models are working, and creating transparency from that black box approach of these models, how do you think that MedTech is grappling with that? And how do you think the industry that is yours, that's specific to you, and how they're handling it?
Yeah, wow, it's such a great question, because 2024 was the year of responsible AI governance. It really brought to light a heavy emphasis, especially in healthcare, how to make sure that we're moving past just development of AI to more quality and value. I'm quoting Dr. Mike Pensina down in Duke AI, who really focuses on making sure that we have a really strong governance model. So that's one angle of AI ethics in MedTech. I think the other angle, which the business folks like to hear a little bit more, is something that Dr. Nigam Shah over in Stanford really quoted, which is to say, okay, ethics is one piece of it, but there are other ethical components, especially in healthcare, that we need to consider. You mentioned the Hippocratic Oath. Is there a greater good to the AI model, to where bias and equity considerations are important, but maybe not as important as the outcomes that AI model can drive? So when is good enough in the delivery and the governance of that model, the adaptability of that model, to make sure that it's not as biased as we are, or maybe has better equity implications so that it makes a greater impact? Fiduciary responsibility is an example of emerging ethics in AI and healthcare. So it's a very interesting question in how clinicians and providers are viewing the Hippocratic Oath as it relates to AI development and the promise that it can bring, but also in avoiding the perils that can happen because of the risks.
Yeah.
Such a deep question.
Yeah, and one of the things, and I think one of the things that I keep coming up across is the fact that we are going to have to evolve our understanding, our policies around the ethics and the application. You know, like here in the U.S. we have HIPAA, which we really, hold to heart in all of our systems, and in Europe it's GDPR. We really need to hold those, but those two will have to evolve as technology becomes better and better, for lack of a better word, right? I mean, it's not necessarily not fantastic now, but it will continue to improve. And how are we defining these areas are going to be the next iteration of how we write our policies, so that we don't have to, we can't rewrite policies every 6 months, right? So how do we best think about framing policies that can last decades? Much like HIPAA has, to be honest,
Yeah, right.
It
Yeah,
needs to be a forward thinking.
It's such a very relevant and recent point. I mean, so the Coalition for Health AI, of which I'm a volunteer member, has really done a good job of integrating both government agencies, healthcare institutions, businesses, providers, patients, to align the 200 plus AI governance frameworks and guidelines that are out there. They're all over the place. Everybody has a voice in responsible AI, which is great.
Right.
But
Yeah.
how do we, to your point, Dr. Patel, make sure that there's some practical relevance so that we're moving the needle? We don't have 200 papers about how it should be done, but rather how it's practically being done. So CHAI has been really great at ramping that up. One of the weaknesses I think that they can improve on is that they have amazing guidelines and frameworks and support for healthcare institutions, but for the innovation side, those that may not have the resources, like the big behemoths, tech behemoths, Google, AWS, Azure, they need help understanding their journey towards responsible AI governance, so that they can, to your point, build consumer trust, so that they can show fidelity to patient data and privacy while moving the needle. And so I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Ravi Dalton and Dr. Ravi Madhavan over at University of Pittsburgh in developing an AI governance maturity model to help them along that journey, so that they're starting somewhere and improving and adapting their AI models towards consumer trust, so that they can start to commercialize and improve with the customer.
That's fantastic. So really talking about scalable solutions that companies can apply, that it doesn't have to take up. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people say is that, we want to implement AI, but we don't know where to start, right? And I think this is, I think when we first met, this was the conversation we had. Like, most people don't know where to start, but also, what are the parameters, right? Most people, if you work in an industry, you start a business, there's some parameters that we have to hit. In AI, it's a little bit like the Wild Wild West right now. No, there are no policies. There is no guidance. There's minimal guidance, I should say. And I think the first thing that we should be building, much to the work that you're doing, is these guiding ethical principles before we start actually scaling solutions that are beyond our control, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, so such a good point.
That's a fantastic that's a fantastic approach. And I think we're going to see more and more of these frameworks, similar to I'm drawing a blank now. HIMSS has their 7-step, I'm forgetting the actual name of it, but similar to that, I think doing something like that in the ethical space for AI will be really valuable for the area that we're in as we're evolving.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think so. NIST has the gold standard with their risk management framework. They, although it's vague, and I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. With the variance of AI algorithms and AI applications, especially in MedTech, I think there needs to be some customizing features in a maturity model, so that they can integrate with the consumers of the healthcare side,
Right.
or they can focus on making sure that they're developing their own judicious way of monitoring, evaluating, and testing,
Yeah.
and iterating their AI models.
And iterating.
You bring up
Yeah,
such a great
exactly.
point. It's so
Exactly.
complex that it requires adaptability. There's no one government agency that is going to be able to throw a hammer at this.
No, and I think to our point, and which brings me to my next question, is around what do you foresee as the biggest challenges in adopting AI technologies in healthcare settings, particularly in hospitals and clinics? And ethics is one of them that we've kind of talked about. Scalability is another. But are there other challenges that you foresee around AI adoption? So, and I would say safe AI adoption, right? Because that's at the crux of everything that we do.
Right. Yes. So let's just follow the money first to answer
Follow
that
the
question.
money. I love it.
Most of the VC companies right now are focused on providing investments in companies that improve workflow and provider efficiencies. And so I think change management's a big piece of that when we're thinking of how AI is going to evolve in the physician workspace.
Yeah.
You're doing amazing things. Dr. Day of MedSynapse is doing amazing things with workshops just to even educate the public on the basics of AI in healthcare. Dr. Anthony Chang talked about medical students and how the majority of them are already using some form of AI. They want it to be incorporated into their curriculum, but they're overwhelmed by all of the information that they have to consume in addition to their medical education.
Right.
And so there are amazing innovators like Dr. Hooman Rashidi, who's the new dean of AI at University of Pittsburgh Medical School, who's developing a curriculum that incorporates no-code AI or automated understanding of AI and utilization in your practices. And so I think that the key is going to be integrating how people work and how people incorporate technology and digital health and AI in a way that affords a very easy button level of change management.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, I think you're right. And education is one of the impacts that this technology is going to have. And to your point, we can't teach yet another degree while you're in medical school, PA school, wherever you are, right? You're there to learn medicine, not coding, for lack of a better, or you're not there to be a computer scientist or a machine learning specialist. And so, although I think the future of the world, coding will become a little bit less and less of not a skill set, but like, because we have a lot of no code information out there and workshops being developed around this, I think we're going to become a little bit more adept. The layperson will become a little bit more adept in terms of using and understanding. It's not that coding is going away. In fact, I think the ones who really want it are really going to become specialized into it. But the people like me who have no coding background won't necessarily need to learn Python in order to accomplish what I need to accomplish on a daily. I can focus on the clinical aspect or the education aspect to help the other piece I foresee in terms of a challenge is our current IT infrastructure at various healthcare organizations. You're smiling, and I think I hit something for you in terms of that's a passion point for you.
Yeah, I mean, taking a step back to the basics. The current advancements of AI is a convergence between, advances in data science by having, cloud-based storage that we didn't have before. You have better algorithms and quite simply, you also have better computer chips. You have better processing. And I think for those institutions, especially those that may be more afraid, more reticent to want to adopt AI in their education or in their healthcare, those are the ones that are a bit behind in that infrastructure. Their data infrastructure, their data strategy, their processing, their computers, their algorithms, the data scientists that they hire, they just haven't invested in it. And so they're behind that convergence, which is leaving everyone in the dust. And so it begs us to really focus on the basics. I think Carnegie Mellon and their AI division does a great job of this. They're doing amazing things with at the edge computing for AI and RAG models. Obviously, University of Pittsburgh, I'm going through an executive MBA program, and Dr. Merchandani and Dr. Abel, who run the healthcare program, aren't shy to talk about AI and how they can incorporate it into their practices. But that's because they have good data infrastructure. They have a good health informatics department with Dr. Yanshin Wang. They have really strong computing information. So I think you're absolutely right, Dr. Patel. Focusing on those basics first is going to be the step towards even just setting up an AI strategy. Such a good point.
I mean, I also feel that right now, a lot of organizations are struggling with how to move forward. And also, it's going to take some upfront investment in these infrastructure to update it to be able to handle the computing power that is needed at various levels, right? Because I don't think we have, some organizations have these legacy infrastructure, and when it comes to their technology, that is not going to be able to handle what is coming in the future. So, people are like, oh, I don't have the money to spend, but you have to look at it as an investment in the future of your viability and scalability if you want to be around 10 years from now, because I think it's going to move that quickly for us in this space. So
now do you think that even in that aspect, it'll require an interdisciplinary approach to understand the cost benefit of investing in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the second points that you made around, the fact that the professors you have in your executive MBA program, where you're taking a class and they have what looks like a very different interdisciplinary team, right? We in healthcare tend to think interdisciplinary: physician, PAs, nurses, social workers, all of those, which is, yes, absolutely, all of those people are still relevant and still needed. But now collaboration teams are expanding to have data scientists and data analysts and computer scientists and engineers. And they are very much going to become the core of these interdisciplinary teams in order for you to accomplish what you need to accomplish. So to your point, it's wonderful that a lot of places have those, but the ones that don't are going to need to invest in the human resources, the knowledge, and the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, in order for them to move forward in these spaces. So that kind of brings me to the next question that I had around: what have you seen in terms of AI, MedTech and AI, in terms of breakthroughs or innovations in improving diagnoses and treatments in healthcare? Are there examples that you've seen that kind of come to mind?
Yes. So the first I would say is there's a lot of excitement around personalized medicine, drug development, cell therapeutics, because of how AI can come up with solutions more rapidly than humans can. The bandwidth is just there, it's just quicker. We're seeing a lot in terms of RNA sequencing and clustering that's really helping out. I think the challenge that you face, and this goes to your point of an interdisciplinary approach, is that the CFOs for the companies are trying to figure out what the ROI is for that R&D and that AI development. It's great if you cure a rare disease, but if you pumped in a couple $1 billion into developing that, where is your company going to make even a break-even point? And so finding cell therapies which can affect a broader patient population, I think, is going to be the future trend in that area. Radiology and imaging is doing amazing things in the multimodal realm, looking at how do you integrate an ultrasound with a CAT scan with an X-ray to find and develop and generate a 3D image for accurate surgical precision. It's so cool. They're doing amazing things. I think heart flow may be an example of that. I think they need some help with commercialization. Plug in Dr. Patel. But other than that, those are some companies that do a really great job. There's a lot in the direct-to-consumer space, Dr. Patel, because there's so much uplift for regulatory hurdles and getting FDA approval. And by the way, I got to give a plug to the FDA team. They've been amazing at this advancement of AI and focusing on advancing new algorithms. So they've made it easier for people to understand the process. So plug into them, but it's a lot of hurdles when you're developing the AI and you're in your Series A funding or in your seed funding. And so they're trying to dabble in the direct-to-consumer space first to develop an MVP or a proof of concept, and then using that data set, advance into a health AI type of model. So we're seeing a lot more in that area. And I think there's a lot in terms of economic inequity impacts and some of the integration of digital health and MedTech. For instance, I know Dr. Dey has been a huge advocate of diabetes. There he is. How are you, Dr. Dey?
Speaking of diabetes, Dr. Dey's here.
So diabetes is such a huge opportunity for AI because you're focused on complex chronic diseases and chronic conditions that are inflammatory issues that cause high cost utilization for payers. It's a problem that providers have challenged with because of patient adherence to drug treatments or insulin therapies or even wound healing therapies. One of my clients, AOTI, does amazing things right now with the therapeutics and preventing amputations and hospitalizations. And they're taking the right steps towards an AI strategy. They're developing their data strategy first. They're incorporating digital enhancements into their therapies so the patient at home can begin to be engaged with virtual therapy nurses towards adherence to therapy. They're using mobile wound imaging apps to gather the data needed to give visibility to the providers and to the payers to help optimize cares and reduce the total costs. And it's working. And those baby steps lead to a more exciting predictive analytics future that they're trying to do with AI. And so I know Dr. Dey's done a lot of that and developing kind of a playbook for how to incorporate AI into diabetes. And I'd love to hear what you're up to next, Dr. Dey.
So hi, Benny. Hi, Dipu. It's great to be back in the podcast. And I was actually in the back end listening to all the delightful conversations both of you are having. And I'm quite intrigued to ask you a few questions, but I'll come on to the point of diabetes and metabolic health. I think that's one domain where we have literally seen a lot of development happening and a lot of therapeutic outcomes coming with the incorporation of the digital health ecosystem. Because largely a lot of it depends upon bringing in those behavioral modifications in the lifestyle of the individual. And I think the connectivity with the patient is making all the differences. So from all the researches that we are doing and that we have done, we are largely seeing that the clinical outcome of the patient, the whole centric of approach to the patient is changing when you incorporate a digital health ecosystem in the management of chronic disease like diabetes and metabolic medicine. And then comes the question of more personalized and precision care. So yes, a lot of things are happening. And I presumably feel that this is one domain that is really going to do a lot better than the other domain because there is always going to be a demand, both from the clinician's end, when they see the improvement happening in the patient's outcome, as well as from the patient's end, because it's doing a lot of ease in the way they are carrying the disease burden. So I think the demand is going to provide the supply, and then it will require a lot of good bonding between medtech entrepreneurs like Benny and doctors and clinicians like us in bringing out the right, model and the right output.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually that kind of touched on one of the questions I had, which is about patient-centered AI applications and experiences, right? Like this speaks to what Amit just said, speaks to the heart of what the possibility is for these tools and technologies to have an impact on it. The other part is that we're going to see, much like we saw with the inflection points around technology when the internet came, when the smartphones came, we're going to see a cultural change in behavior from our patients, right? One of the things that we all struggle with as clinicians is adherence and compliance to plans and regimens. And while we can't change an individual's personality, what we can change is behavior. And I think these tools are going to help us change the behavior. It will be a slow change, but I think there's promise to it because these tools are going to make it easier for the patient to take their medicine or log their food or whatever it may be, and also not having to constantly upload things, because we are using MedTech and wearables and all those devices to automatically send stuff to our clinicians so that they can make real-time decisions on for our care. I don't have to sit there and log every single thing that I'm eating, drinking, and so I think that's another way. I think the space, MedTech, and wearables, which Benny and I were just talking about the differences between MedTech as a whole as an industry versus wearables, which I think is a subset. What did you say, Benny? I think you use a particular phrase for it.
Yeah, I'm one of the older heads, Dr. Day. So I was saying digital health's a subset of MedTech, and Dr. Patel said it's digital health is the primary force, which is probably more accurate today in 2024.
I mean, and you know what? In another 6 months, it'll change. So I think that's the beauty of this space, which is there's always something new to learn and a new way of looking at solutions. So
I'd like to amplify a point that you made earlier.
Go ahead, please.
I think you talked about wearables, which are great. Sometimes if it's a wearable that's difficult to take off and throw in the corner, then yeah, there's definitely opportunity there. There's a lot of excitement around ambient technology.
Yes.
And how you can utilize large language models and devices to gain predictive analytics from noise. One of the companies that I did a study with on an interdisciplinary approach of understanding the business impact of AI governance is a company called Coco Labs in Palo Alto. Saurabh Gupta was the CEO. And coincidentally, it's World Sleep Day, and they focus in curing insomnia through ambient technology, which can monitor a patient's biometrics to do just-in-time interventions with conversational AI. And so to your point, personalized medicine needs to start with the data that you gather from that patient-centric area, from the patient in place, whether it's at the home or the LTAC or in the hospital, gathering that information to be able to have probability prediction of how they need care and how we should treat them is going to be, I think, the future in that space. It's a really good point.
Yeah, ambient AI is going to be, we think smart homes are smart now. I think this will be a game changer. Don't you think?
Yeah, we're at the beginning stages of large action models. How do we have algorithms that integrate across our many devices? Right. I love that my home has Allegra. I can't say her name because then she'll prompt.
Yeah, you can't say, don't say the name. I have one too, so it'll go.
Yeah, Odessa. So, but it's integrated with the lights and it's integrated with the music. Right. And imagine an algorithm that you're the vice chancellor for the School of Rehabilitation Sciences at Pittsburgh. Imagine something that can integrate all these rehab devices for the patient. To me, that's the most exciting, because in healthcare, especially for insurance payers and hospitals, it's difficult for them to want to adopt point solutions, which may be very innovative and may be very effective at treating a specific area of the patient. But it may be too cumbersome and too burdensome for them to have 5 different remote therapy monitoring teams calling them for their heart rate, for their wound care, for their diabetes care, their insulin. And so what if you had an AI that integrated all these for the patient? That's a really good point you bring up, Dr. Patel.
Yeah. And just to add to the subset that both of you were discussing, I just want to bring in a third thing in the space, and I'm sure you would be interested and excited to talk about it, is the latest development of humanoid robots. And I think we've been all hearing the updates about, Optimus coming in from Tesla and Figaro 1 coming in from OpenAI. So what are your thoughts on that, Benny? We are looking at humanoid nurses, humanoid health assistants, a part of that MedTech coming in. The pace at which AI is growing, it's only something that we can imagine coming very soon than later.
Oh, would I love it. Wouldn't you love to have one walking around and handing you papers, a meal? Jeez. It's not practical, though. It's just we're just not there yet, largely because of the regulatory landscape. The patient safety implications of having a robot and so many things can go wrong is a tough one. So just like Dr. Patel and I were talking about starting small, I think we always quote, Dr. Scott Campbell of Kaiser says,
Yeah.
if you want an AI strategy, just start with a simple ML with a couple of key objective features, have success, and then you could build upon that.
Yeah.
I think the same thing could be said for robotics. You don't need to have a humanoid robot, but maybe something that looks like, I think Hello Robot has a device that looks like a Roomba with an arm, and it can potentially help aging patients open up a drawer. Or maybe it can help feed them or provide them with a glass of milk, something that simple. Those are things that we can start small and then develop in the regulatory landscape. But there is, to Dr. Patel's point, a precautionary principle here in the United States, which is a good thing, but it is a huge hurdle that to innovation that we have to get past. Man, boy, Dr. Day, I'd love to have a humanoid robot, though. It'd be amazing.
I will say, I mean, this is the beauty of this space, which I think all three of us find really exciting, is there are a lot of these innovations and projects that are happening. I think, is it Samsung who has Bali, which is it's like a little ball that rolls around with you in the house, again, it's not ready for market. It's not scalable quite yet. But the fact that we're able to tinker in this space, and while we're tinkering and learning, and we're educating the people, the workforce, the healthcare providers, the patients, all of these people through this pipeline, so that when it is ready to come to market, when it is ready to be used, when the robot nurse is ready to be launched at a scale in a hospital organization, we will have the skill set and a skilled workforce to use and leverage these tools for our benefit. And also, by the way, equitably. I think that's the one thing that we, one of the things that we are always looking for, which is, I have to say, there's been a lot of trends that have come and gone in terms of technology. We have never talked about equity as much as we have in this particular tool. Which is amazing to me, right? It's at the forefront of everything we're developing, at least from the people I talk to.
Yeah. I mean, even to the point where it may be becoming the villain and polarized and politicized, certainly. Like, what does health equity mean? Does it mean access for all? Does it mean providing more resources to bring disparaged or disadvantaged populations up to the level that everybody else has received? And so, to your point, I think AI is an opportunity for us to improve equity without us having to worry about the politics of it all. It's something that can be built in automatically, so it's not an issue later on.
Right.
It's a huge opportunity.
So this brings us to my last question, I guess, where we've seen a lot of trends. The last, I think, 2-3 years have been amazing in terms of our minds kind of exploding around all of the stuff that's been going on. Where do you see us in the next 5 to 10 years in this space?
I see the development of AI not slowing down until we have some regulation in place. So first and foremost, the administration has done a really amazing job of emphasizing the need for responsible AI development, largely in the terms of government agencies adopting them or developing them, which is huge because they're going to be the biggest customers. So if you want to sell to the government, you need to develop some type of governance model. I also see a slow in adoption. I see in the market a weeding out of lesser models or those models that don't have the resources to provide either value, quality, or governance, which may be a shame in some cases because the innovations are amazing and they solve a really big problem, but they just can't manage the business well enough to achieve it. And then I think I see, obviously, the behemoths just plowing forward and developing new technologies, integrating their cloud infrastructures for more AI algorithms and partnerships. I see there being risk for the small guy in those type of partnerships, so there needs to be more scrutiny there. And I see NVIDIA really continuing to lead away from a processing standpoint. I love
NVIDIA is gonna
my
like
NVIDIA stock. It's insane. I keep wanting to sell it just to secure more, but
Yes.
so delicious. So I see them doing, and they don't rest on their laurels. They do a really good job of
they do.
educating, to your point, and making sure that they're providing resources for businesses.
And I will
Um,
say one of the things, the handful of NVIDIA folks I've spoken to, they do talk about equity and
Yes.
and equality, excuse me, I said it twice, in their product design, and how they are going to make sure that at least the intentions are there. I don't know if there's actual deliverables on that, but the intentions and those conversations are being had. And I'm seeing that more and more across the technology sector.
Right. I see, and the last thing I'll mention on the topic of NVIDIA and healthcare, I see more at the edge computing, especially with
Oh,
RAG
for
models
sure.
coming
I was
about.
about to say, yeah,
Right. I see it just affords for better patient privacy.
yeah,
It affords for better cybersecurity.
for sure.
And I also see some more enforcement on the cybersecurity side. I think there was someone had mentioned there's only 3% of cybersecurity breaches or laws that are broken that actually get indicted or get charged.
Okay.
So I mean, it's a lucrative business right now with very low risk. And I think that that's going to change. I think there's going to be more resources put into enforcing cybersecurity laws.
That would be, I would agree with that. Amit, you
Yeah,
had a question.
very, very interesting views there, Benny. And just before we go on to the segment where we ask questions from the audience, let's bring both of you views on one very important point. And recently, during my travel to the European Union, I realized that, we have three spectrums of regulations actually. So at one end, where you have a very strict regulation, you have the EU, the GDPR. And if you look at us in India, I mean, we are quite relaxed. We are developing the guidelines and the regulations. It's in the parliament. It's still not very strongly implemented. And then I would put the United States somewhere in between, of these two spectrums, wherein there is a bit of leniency, but it's still guidelines. So my question and my thoughts from both of you is, how do you see the medtech or the digital health tech, whichever way you put it, startups growing and developing in each of these zones with respect to the guidelines and the regulations? For example, if I give you, in India, we have a huge amount of startups coming in and a lot of fundings going into health tech. Because primarily I see the reason being is the guidelines are not very stringent, the regulations are not very stringent. So, everyone into the game wants to sort of put their hands into it and see how that goes. Whereas in the European Union, you're going to see very limited access and very stringent laws, kind of curbing most of the startups who wants to sort of sprout themselves into the health tech market. So I mean, that would probably make a lot of change, and it will add to the dynamism of how this health tech market is going to also be placed across the globe. So what are both of your thoughts on this domain, the regulations guiding the healthcare startups and the medtech startups?
Okay, I'll
Would
go
you like to
first.
go?
I think there's a lot of room to grow. Here's what I kind of see these three entities as, and I'm not saying that this is fast, like this is exactly what I mean, but if you think about the three spaces, the US has a very innovative space in terms of ideas. We're as an ecosystem when it comes to ideas, we're definitely the leaders, I would say, in the world. The problem is those ideas are not always implementable in the regulatory space we have. So where do we go? Then we go to India, where there's fewer regulations, where the actual implementation of that idea is much more feasible, right? An MVP could potentially be launched in a market like India. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, right? From a safety, quality, all of that perspective, but I'm saying if you just simply look at it from this point of view, but then once you've implemented the idea and it's gotten traction, you go to Europe to actually launch, because those are the most stringent rules that you've kind of worked out your kinks in the implementation phase of it. That is a very simplistic way of looking at it. It's actually not even a equitable way of looking at it. But I think looking at it that way allows us to say, okay, well, we need to find a commonality in all of those three spaces. Because what is good about HIPAA or the regulatory space in the US can benefit a space like India where there aren't many. And also the stringent guidelines around GDPR can also benefit the other two. So there needs to be this singular kind of, I don't know, ecosystem, for lack of a better word, on discussion on policies that we all agree on a global level, while still allowing those spaces to continue innovating and implementing their ideas, and creating a little bit of a playground, to use a technical term, so that we can do that. But that requires policy. That requires us to kind of come together on policy.
Nice thoughts. Benny, your inputs?
Yeah, I love Dr. Patel's path of least resistance approach, because that's certainly going to work. I think it depends on the providers. It depends on you.
Yeah.
It's going to require, does the solution require regionality in their patient population? Because it may not be transferable between countries.
Right.
Does it have a more specific approach or a novel approach that doesn't yet have regulatory insight? I think there's also cultural implications there too. I mean, think of the idea from Death and Dying. Americans view death and dying a lot differently than Europeans. We want to live forever, and they want better healthcare. And so I think that there's a lot of considerations that when you're building your product or when you're building your algorithm, it goes to finding the right problem first that you want to solve. Because if you're fixing a huge gap, then I think any company and any country and any consumer or healthcare system is going to want to find pathways for you to help solve that problem. So it starts with the problem first, I think, Dr. Dey.
I will also add, not to this particular, but a general concept, is that I do think that we are going to move from single point solutions to multiple point solutions in the future. And I think the idea, innovation space, all of this needs to kind of come together, because more and more hospital organizations, clinics are going to require, I want to buy one thing that talks to every platform so that I don't have to, log into 5 different things in order to take care of my patient. And I think we're definitely going to move forward. But again, that goes back to our point of having good infrastructure in place. So that you can.
And are they willing to pay a premium for all of these point solutions to come together towards a partnership solution?
And that these are the hard conversations we're going to have going forward.
I'm going to take it from what Dipu said, and fantastic inputs from both of you. And just to add one liner to this, I think the whole survival of the medtech space in the world of globalization is going to be more flourishing once we have a common ground of global regulations and guidelines, because that's where it's going to equate. And then, Dipu, that's where your question and probably thoughts of equity is going to come. When I'm going to have these globalized guidelines. So at one point where the HIPAA and the GDPR is going to be prevalent, and India is already coming up with their own guidelines, there has to be a common grounds in which maybe all the 3 or the other countries needs to coexist, and the medtech space would be sort of revolving around that, I think. And that's where they're going to be more rich with the data, because we know that tech and AI will survive only on data. Otherwise, it will not thrive. So I think that is something time is going to prove how it's going to go, but just something that, collaboratively, all of us can look to work on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I can even think of a place where there is that common ground, Dr. Dey, and it's academia. I think sometimes even in business, with the advancements of AI and how rapidly it's evolving, we're getting left behind in business. You start to develop an algorithm and it's outdated a year later. So academia is constantly iterative in how they evolve in AI, and finding that commonality across horizontal and vertical vertices is going to be really helpful. That's the spot where we're going to need to partner with.
Yes. X, Y, and Z axes, all of them. We need
X,
to
Y,
work
and Z
on
is right.
X, Y, and Z.
On that note, thank you. We're going to ask Harsha to come in and see if they have questions from our audience.
Yes, so we'll take one question. So what steps are necessary to ensure the clinical validity and reliability of AI-driven medical technologies? And how can healthcare professionals trust the outputs generated by these systems?
Excellent question.
What a
Good
solid
question.
question.
Yes.
So we did a study, Saurabh Gupta, where we looked at employee, investor, and consumer perceptions of AI governance towards consumer trust and business impact. The employees and investors resoundingly preferred objectives of the company in its development of AI and oversight, respectively. The consumers, which surprised me, were focused on explainability and transparency. In fact, I'll quote one qualitatively who said, "I understand AI is evolving, but if they told me what it does clearly and what are the risks, then I can make my own decision as to whether or not I want to purchase it." And I think the same goes with healthcare providers and healthcare systems. There's informed consent with innovation adoption, and there are some that are better at innovation adoption than others on that hyperbole. So I do think that the first step is to doing the basic homeworks of continuously improving your model in a way that's consistent with NIST standards. So that's where a maturity model may come into play. The second thing is to make sure that you're targeting customers and healthcare systems which understand the steps needed to take towards adoption. I mentioned Duke AI earlier, where they have gateway points where committees will look at a solution between the testing, evaluation, and validation stages before they adopt something. And so those are good places to begin to build consumer trust because you can amplify and replicate that in other customers. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but it's a very profound question we're still trying to figure out.
It's like another 2-hour conversation already, that question. But no, I think you did. I think I agree with you. I think it's really having a partnership between the organization who is looking to adopt this piece of technology and the business who is supplying it. There has to be transparency between the two and an understanding of a common goal that they are looking to achieve. And I agree with, I will requote Scott from around what he says, which is start small. What I tell my students is, so I teach quality improvement. And one of the things I tell them is that you're not going to try to solve world hunger. You're not going to create world peace, but you are going to take a little bite out of that. Right. So don't try to solve this, but let's start here so that you have a viable product that you can say, this is how it worked. Let's build on this.
You're not going to be prime minister. You're not going to be president of the United States. Don't
I
try.
don't
Just do something that works.
Do something. Yeah, exactly. Something small and meaningful. And I will say a lot of times patients actually appreciate the small changes that you make, because actually it's the small changes that impact the user experience, the end customer experience in this case.
I think this is a very, very interesting question that was raised. And there was one point about validation. And I think that is something that is really a topic of discussion, maybe one podcast on only validation of AI and tech models by experts. And if I can just add to it in brief, I think Piyush Mathur, he's from the Cleveland Clinic. He was there on our podcast a few episodes back. And he came up with this fantastic tool called Humanly that kind of helps you validate a large language model. And I think it's just a start where you really need effective way where human experts, people in the ground zero, the healthcare providers can actually validate the processes and the outputs of AI tech model, because they're the best people out there who understands the need gap and who can actually sort of give that kind of a thumbs up that yes, this is a product that is going to actually help solve the problem in my patient group or in my area of practice. And that's where we all start from, the collaboration between the health tech industry and the medical fraternity. So I think the validation is going to be a very important key. Where do we stand now? Like, for example, if I give you the spectrum of India, we have a lot of startups coming up with a lot of unvalidated models, with a lot of models and with a lot of products coming into the market, which probably doesn't even have a need in the space. In the US, I would say a lot of the validation is centered towards FDA approvals because being a large, regulatory body, everything has to go through FDA. So there is a set of standards that is put there, but there has to be something in between, a validation by human clinician expert of most of the medtech models. And I think that is going to go many steps. It will take us many steps into the adoption, something that Benny keeps speaking about. It has to be adopted by the clinicians. Clinician will adopt a AI model if he is involved in the validation process. So I think this is a very, very interesting question that has been brought up. And yes, it just opens up a box of questions. So
I was going to say, then we could
separate
talk for
podcast.
another hour on
Absolutely,
this.
absolutely. But fantastic
yeah.
discussions.
Yeah, but I mean,
Thank
to your
you.
point, we didn't touch upon this much, but I'm in the camp. I'm in the section of people who believe that AI in healthcare should be an extension of the provider's benefits.
True.
I don't think that it should be augmented AI, not its own replacement of physicians. I do believe it. And there's probably no way to implement something that would replace physicians anyway. I think the challenge is mind share. With physicians increasing in burden and there's a provider shortage, how do you make it easy? And this is where Dr. Patel and I were touching upon it earlier. How do you make it easier for them to adopt it and validate it? And that's going to be the key, making it easier for them to understand and improve upon.
Yeah, baby steps. I think.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. Well,
It's the name of this podcast.
Yeah, this was an amazing discussion. Thank you,
Fantastic.
Benny, for your time and expertise. Thank you, Amit, and for joining us on this lovely podcast. We'll say goodbye for today, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for another stimulating episode.
Can't wait. Thank you guys for your time. Wish me luck. I'm in the Mass Challenge for early stage innovation.
Congratulations.
Funding, so
Congratulations.
wish me
When
luck.
do you do it, Benny?
Shout out to Mass Challenge.
When are you doing? It's coming up, right?
Yeah, it's coming up soon. Yeah, it's
yeah.
over the course of this summer.
Yeah.
So me and my partner, Dr. Yanshin Wang, are developing some age tech AI to help reduce family provider burden, and also to make sure that we're optimizing care for elders in place with cognitive decline. So wish us luck.
Awesome. Oh, good luck.
Best
Good luck.
wishes from me.
Yes.
Thanks for the time. What a great conversation. I had fun.
Fantastic. Thank you, Harshita. Over to you.
Yeah. As we draw this enriching conversation to a close, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished guests, Benny, Dipu, and Dr. Amit, for their invaluable contributions and insights. And to our audience, we express sincere appreciation for your engagement and curiosity. Thank you for joining us today, and until we meet again, stay informed, stay inspired, and above all, stay healthy.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you. Bye.